Hello, guys and dolls. Welcome back to my podcast, Conversations with Zalia. I'm your host, Zalia with Zalia Lorraine, and today we're going in this podcast. And today in this podcast episode, we're going to discuss the Prince Cinematic Trilogy. Now, we all know the late talented Prince as a very eclectic musician who has 39 albums to date and played every known instrument and promoted people like the likes of TheTime, Carmen Electra, and Vanity 6, Apollonia, you name it. But but a lot of people don't even know that Prince has not one, not two, but three movies, excluding Sign of the Times, which is a documentary movie. And the three movies in question in these two movies, and it wasn't just Purplerain, there were two other movies named Under the Cherry Moon, which flopped in the box office, but has some cult following, and Graffiti Bridge, which is just basura. And in this podcast, we're going to get into three of those movies. Pretty much I'll explain the plot, rundown, and synopsis, and the characters. Explain my thoughts of those movies, and then conclusion. So, the first movie we're going to start with is Purplerain, which is pretty much a Prince vanity project. Now, before the movie stars Prince and his band, Morris as his rival, and Apollonia as pretty much the prize they're fighting over. And Apollonia, whose real name is Patricia Cotero, she wasn't supposed to be casted in the movie. The original actress was Vanity, but Vanity and Prince broke up and she went off on her own thing. And Apollonia was added on at the last minute. Another interesting fact before I get into the movie is that Apollonia, she was married at the time of the movie, but she had to keep the marriage a secret just so her and Prince would look like a real life couple. In the movie, and another thing I'll preface about the movie is that the original script of the movie was a lot more darker. Was a lot more X-rated, and some of the scenes in that movie, like the farm scene and the rehearsal scene, they were portraying in the trailer. Just to preface it, but let's get into it. So the movie begins with the kid and his band performing Let's Go Crazy. And pretty much in this scene, we're introduced to the characters, namely the kid, Morris, who's your typical 80s lover boy, and his wingman, Jerome. And then Apollonia, who we first see pretty much ditching a cab driver because she couldn't afford to pay the fare. And then while entering the club, since the club bouncer is played by Prince's real life bodyguard, you'll notice in these movies, I'll get to that some of the characters are played by people in Prisoner's Circle, and she winds up moving to Jill, the waitress, played by Jill Jones, a Prince protege, who gives her a card to write down the information to audition. Then the kid winds up bumping into Apollonia, pretty much instantly falls in love with her, with him playing pretty much standing behind her, looking at her, which when Apollonia greets him, she pretty much disappears. And this is while, during this time, Morris and the band, they're performing Jungle Love. In my opinion, really watch this, we really never got the rivalry between the time and the kid besides fighting over the prize, which is Apollonia. But back into it. And during the time's performance, you can see in the balcony a troupe of background dancers, three of whom who become the the three male backup dancers that worked for Prince during the early '90s era, which is a very interesting fact in itself. Then the kid motorcycles his motorcycles back home to the point to where he arrives to an argument between him and his parents, where it's revealed that he lives in a very unstable household. And during the next scene, we get some exposition from Billy, who's played by another person close to Prince, who was a music promoter, who's talking with Morris, and they tend to be best buddies. It is revealed during their exposition that Prince's father was a failed musician. That apparently went crazy or went off the rails, and he's been an abusive nut job ever since. And also during the exposition, they pretty much found out the Chris saying that he plays a lot of crap that people don't want to hear. Then it cuts to Morris and Jerome overseeing the audition of the girl group they're pretty much building, which consists and the girl group members who are played by Susan Moonsey and Brenda Bennett of Vanity/Avalon 6 respectively. They're practicing their dance steps, and Morris chastises them for not doing them correctly. Pretty much chastises them for not doing them correctly, pretty much chastises them. Meanwhile, back at the club, Prince is shown chatting up with Jill, who is implying on multiple occasions to have a thing for him, and she's shown holding Apollonia's pretty much info. And Jill also gives the kid a tape that Wendy and Lisa made, which will become very important later on. But while Jerome and Morris are chatting regarding having Jill giving them Apollo's number, Morris' old flame pops up and cusses him out, in which Morris responds and by having Jerome effortlessly throw her in the dumpster. Which in modern day viewers will pretty much see as shocking, but it wasn't seen as shocking back then. You gotta remember this movie was made in the 80s, like 40 years ago. So of course they're going to contain some things that don't look right in the modern day. Just saying. Then Prince plays Mind Games with Apollonia, and they go on a motorcycle ride set to Take Me With You, where they're chatting up each other and chatter. Then Prince, playing with his little mind games with her, tells her that she's not going to make it unless she purifies herself from the waters of Lake Minnetonka. And pretty much we're showing Apollonia stripping down to her birthday suit and jumping into the water, with Prince telling her that wasn't Lake Minnetonka, much to her anger. Because if you were to look at it, it wasn't surprising. There's a spoilers. I forgot to preface this podcast episode with spoilers. So since I will discuss certain plot points and pretty much explain the plot of movies, there will be spoilers. But back to the story, concerning if you're watching this movie, the reason the relationship turning out toxic the way it did wasn't surprising, considering how pretty much the stunts that the kid was doing. Then we're shown with Morris and Jerome, who are pretty much the comic relief characters of the movies and the main people that carry this movie. Since Prince attended the Keanu Reeves Academy for Acting. But Morris and Jerome is shown pretty much they create a secret code to Morris and Jerome. They create a secret code to pretty much alert each other when Apollonia shows up, which is the most funniest scene in the movie, the password scene where they're playing Who's on First. If you get the joke, you get the joke. It's an anime get the pair of comedians wrong. It's an old Abba Costello joke, by the way, for those that don't get it. Then it's the next night at the club, and the main band performing is the Modernaires, fronted by Des Dergerson, a former member of the Revolution. And the one thing distracted from this performance is the way that the keyboardist was dancing. Like, oh my god, it was so freaking annoying. But Wendy and Lisa, they confront the kid for not playing their tape, which leads to an argument, which Prince pretty much during the argument, Prince pulls out this puppet that he mimics without speaking for some weird reason, which upsets Wendy and Lisa and cause Bobby Z to quip about Wendy's period. Then meanwhile, Jerome alerts Morris about Apollonia, and Morris tries to entice and seduce Apollonia with corny 80s pickup lines. Then the kid, seeing Morris with Apollonia, decides to woo her with the beautiful ones, which is successful because in fact she goes home with the kid. And Apollonia and the kid, they see the kid's parents making up. And Apollonia goes to the kid's room where she listens to some strange sound of a strange audio of a woman crying, even though you could mistake it for the woman making some personal noises if you catch by dread, which leads to after Loving and Prince have a conversation. This leads to them making soup in his bed. And to add some little bit of trivia, there is 3 different versions of the souping scene. One that was PG or PG-13, one that was X-rated, one that was R-rated, and if I remember correctly, they chose the R-rated version. And I never watched that soup scene until when I watched it either on YouTube or on DVD, because the version I used to watch at Purplerain as a kid was the TV version where they edit certain scenes. Because in the TV version, the scene of the kid and Apollonia, it pretty much shows them making out and cuts to them riding on the bike. So after that, we're seeing showing them pretty much riding on the motorbike, with the kid dropping him off, him going to First Avenue where they're rehearsing, and Wendy, Lisa, they try to convince the kid to record a song, but he pretty much says no and puts his foot down. And another side note, rewatching the movie and then learning how Wendy, Lisa, and Prince fell out during the parade tour, which you need to do some research on, which I'm not going to get to in this podcast episode. You gotta do some research on it. It's probably kind of, watching those scenes kind of hit differently, doesn't it? But Apollonia, she's shown walking with her chain when Morris makes her an offer to join his group, which initially she refuses, but she pretty much makes the offer with him. Then the kid, he's trying to compose and is shown listening to Wendy and Lisa's tape, which is called Song Groove. But he can't focus because his parents are arguing. He tries to get in between his mom and dad, and his dad wanted smacking him. And I should know that in the original script, after that whole argument between his mom and dad, his mom tries to make a pass at him. But Apollonia comes to visit him and gives him a guitar In exchange, Prince gives her an earring, and pretty much Apollonia kills the vibe by saying that she joined Morris's group, which causes her to get smacked upside her kid by the kid, which disturbs Apollonia. She winds up leaving with Prince stating, "Don't you know what Morris is about? You can trust him." He didn't exactly say that, but I'm just paraphrasing. Then the kid visits First Avenue, and the band are practicing about Wendy and Lisa. I wonder where they're at. Then Windows Cry Please, and we're shown a montage of Apollonia and the kid making soup in the barn, which was in the original script, but they cut it out for some reason. And there are pictures of the scene online of Prince in the barn and Prince and Apollonia before they go to the barn. And Apollonia and the group rehearsing with Morris supervising. And I should know that during this scene, I had recorded the First Avenue scene, and I think it's supposed to happen right after the First Avenue scene, but they just shown the trailer. But Prince is shown trying to take Apollonia out of rehearsals and shown fighting with Morris and TheTime. But back to the story. Prince arrives seeing his mom bruised and goes to confront his dad. Which, let's be honest, the Prince's acting is kind of and I mean no disrespect, but the Prince's acting is kind of, especially when he tries to act tough, it's kind of on par with The Weeknd's acting in The Idol. If you know, you know. Like the scene, "Answer me, mother effer," is giving "Let me catch you, look at her again" vibes. But the dad asks him if he has a girl, and he said yes, never get married, and he says never get married, and leaves. Which we're shown here, and then the dialogue for Computer Blue is heard, which we're cut to the kid in his band performing. Meanwhile, Apollonia is in the car with Morris, she's accompanying him to introduce the group. The group Apollonia 6, and she doesn't really want to go out of alienating Prince, but she has to appease the two other band members. And then when Apollonia arrives, the kid decides to taunt her by recording by singing Darling Nikki, which causes her to run off. And I know y'all tired of me interrupting this podcast episode, but Darling Nikki, if that song sounds familiar, that was the song that in so many ways led to us getting the parental advisory sticker, since Trevor Gore and other politician-wise, they were big mad about their children listening to Darling Nikki, that they made a list of songs called 5015 that was about Satan worship, sex, or drugs. And the only songs of Prince that was in that list was Darling Nikki, if I remember correctly, and the song he wrote, Sugar Walls for Sheena Easton. But let me ask you this. Let me ask you, my listeners, this. Considering how explicit modern day music is nowadays, is Darling Nikki tame to modern day sexual songs or not? Let me know. And Billy chastised him for bringing his personal problems on stage. And like I said, Prince was giving able to spy acting. So what's the next night? And Apollonia 6, they're performing sex shooter at a nightclub with the kid watching. And with Billy warns him that if he doesn't pretty much get his ish together, he's gonna be kicked off the roster. Then Apollonia and Morris, they're shown celebrating. When with Morris getting into with Apollonia getting into Morris's car, until Prince literally rides on his motorcycle and forces Apollonia to join, pretty much ride with him, which rides off and pretty much ruins Morris's outfit by driving to a puddle, in which Morris caused Prince a long hair redact. And it is taking rocket science to put two and two together to watch the movie. Then the kid and Apollonia, I don't know why I keep calling it Prince, they have an argument and when the kid tries him for drinking, Apollonia snaps back at him, which leads to the kid attacking Apollonia. In the original script, the whole attack escalates into all out SA. If you read the original script. But it takes Apollonia chastising him for him to realize his mistake. Then when he returns back home and cuts the lights on, his dad attempts to delete himself, which leads to him getting hospitalized and his mom going with him. Then, because of his father's suicide attempt, he winds up having a big freak out, which leads to him discovering all of a sudden wanted to play when he was a song. So come the next night at the time they wanted performing The Bird, and in the only time Morris was a jerk to the kid, Morris taunts him about his recent issues, his recent familial issues, saying, "How's the family?" Though Morris becomes to regret it. Then Prince decides to perform "Purplerain," and the crowd is in awe. And after the performance, Prince runs to his motorcycle with the intent of running out of town, but he winds up returning back, ignoring Jill, who, as I stated earlier, is heavily implied to have feelings for him. It winds up as met at the door by Apollonia. They make up. They wind up with Prince performing "I Will Die For You" and "Baby As a Star" as an encore. Happy ending. Now, my thoughts with Purplerain is that if you're watching this, looking at it as a modern day point of view, Apollonia pretty much, let's start with Apollonia. Apollonia was pretty much a sidelight love interest / prize. Besides wanting to become a singer, she barely has no personality besides being the prize that Morris and Prince are fighting over. Then Morris and the kid, you really cannot root for both of them. The kid, due to him being a Christian Grey-esque slime ball and abuser. Though we also have to take into consideration his upbringing, and then the Morris for pretty much being a lecherous lover boy, who's also extremely misogynistic. We cannot forget that scene when he had his wingman / sidekick throw a girl into the dumpster. And then that's not even overlooking how, in so many words, the kid ruined Apollonia's dream, which Nakarite goes in depth into it in his What's Not Correct with Purplerain video. It's a good watch. And it goes really in depth regarding pretty much the story and all that. But the plot was barely there's barely any plot. Movie is just a almost 2 hour long concert film and vanity project. Now let's get into its sequel, Graffiti Bridge. Now, a lot of people, even the most extreme Prince fans, they don't even know that Purple Rain has a sequel made 6 years later called Graffiti Bridge. And Graffiti Bridge is basura. Mucho basura. We'll get into Graffiti Bridge once we get back on our break. Hello, guys and dolls. Welcome back from our break. So, as I mentioned before, Purple Rain had a sequel that came out 6 years later called Graffiti Bridge, and you haven't heard of it just because it flopped in the box office. It flopped hard to the point Prince stopped making movies. So Graffiti Bridge, if you watch the movie, watch Graffiti Bridge. Graffiti Bridge is pretty much canon to Purple Rain, though. Because of how horrible the movie is, there are a lot of people, Prince fans included, that exclude it as that pretty much don't count it as canon, and it shows. So the whole premise of Graffiti Bridge is apparently Billy, the club owner, passed away, and his will. First Avenue became divided into 4 nightclubs in an area called Seven Corners. 4 nightclubs in 3 corners, which barely makes any freaking sense. But then again, some of the things in this movie doesn't make any sense. In the 4 nightclubs, though the other 2 don't get any barely getting any spotlight, are Graffiti Bridge, Prince's Club, which I forgot the name of Prince's Club. I think it's New Power Generation, which was to be the name of his new backing band for much of the 90s. Then Morris's Club is Pandemonium. Then George Clinton's Club is, I forgot the name of George Clinton's Club, and then I do know that Melody Cool is named after their owner, played by legendary singer Mavis Staples, who's pretty super above this movie. But yeah, and pretty much the kid and Morris, they're now rival club owners, and Morris wants to take over the other. Morris, who's been flannerized to some Lex Luthor ex-supervillain, he wants to take over the other clubs, more so the kids' club, saying that he doesn't like the spiritual music that the kids been playing, which is literally a copy of the previous movie where Billy wanted to kick the kid out because he didn't like the type of music he was playing. And then another thing that's also acknowledged as canon was the fate of the kid's father, because the movie, they left the kid's father's condition vague, made it seem as though he was going to recover. But they wanted revealing what really happened to the kid's parents, which I'll get to when I'm currently reviewing this movie. So Morris has a board meeting with Morris, who's now in his supervillain phase, has some crazy Dr. Evil-esque board meeting with the original members of the time, including Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and they reunited to record an album, by the way, which is named after the nightclub. And during the meeting, he has one of the members, Terry Lewis, eat a pepper after he took 2 peppers, one for me, one for Terry Lee, but Terry pretty much chickens out after he pretty much freaks out after eating the pepper, which Morris pretty much, who at this point now Lex Luthor as nightclub villain, laughs it off. Then we're shown the kid in his band performing the new Power Generation song. Then Morris, Jerome, and Morris's girlfriend Robin, who's established as Billy's daughter, who was never mentioned in the previous movie, mind you, played by Robin Power, who you may recognize as the video victim in Ice Cube's "It Was a Good Day" music video. They arrive at the club and Morris pretty much chastises the kid for his music, all while Aura, or however you pronounce her name, is watching. And I forgot to mention, there's a new quasi-love interest character named Aura, who's this mini pixie dream girl who's trying to solve the kid and Morris's beef. Then the time rush in, they perform, release it. And then after the performance, Morris pulls the ultimate disrespect card by peeing on a plant in the kids' club. And also in this scene, we're also introduced to the unfunny side characters, such as the bouncer TC, who keeps pestering Prince to allow him to rap. Then the other band members, which were Prince's real life band members, Miko Weaver, Levi Caesar, and I forgot the other funny side character. And as in this purplerain, both Morris and Jerome carry this garbage movie. And I'm going by memory. Now, I forgot to mention in regards to Prince's love life, Prince is now dating Jill for some reason. And we have no word on what happened with Apollonia, between Apollonia and Kid. More likely Apollonia left him. And Jill is ticked off with Prince because Prince won't let her perform, and she tries to pretty much deflect to Morris's club, which she does. And when Prince confronts her about it, she takes off her underwear and blows a raspberry at him and leaves. Like, I'm not making this up. Go watch the scene for yourself. What the freak? Like, what the heck? I have no words. I'll leave it at that. And this comes after a performance by Baby Tevin Campbell singing Round and Round. And Tevin Campbell, he's also in this movie as well as Mavis Staples' son. But in some scenes, there's Prince writing a letter to his parents and to himself as well. And in the monologue, it's revealed what happened to the kid's parents. Namely, the dad pretty much died from his deletion attempt, and the mom lost it to the point she got put in a mental hospital. Which, super dark, by the way. Then Morris and Jerome wound up encountering Aura, and they wanted to take her in, which was her plan in the first place. Meanwhile, at the pandemonium, Morris tries to size up Aura, and Aura pretty much lures him into her seduction trap, which gets Robin jealous. And then during the whole date scene, Jill performs, but the spotlight is taken away from Jill, who's not even singing, and Aura winds up singing instead. And I should note, for a fun fact, Jill was supposed to have a larger part in the movie, But in the movies, we're supposed to have either Madonna or Kim Basinger, but when Prince changed the script and her part got minimized, she was apparently super angry that she ripped the script up. And then she was also even more angry that she had to mimic someone else's vocals in that scene. And then Morris as Morris and Jerome are walking with Aura. Prince, who came to the pandemonium because he got alerted by his bandmates about Aura, bumps into Aura, and then Aura is pretty much out of it. Morris and Jerome take advantage of her drunken state and place them place her in a car to take them to their home. And we get a pretty much Prince following them on his motorbike set to Thebes in the Temple. And despite how garbage this movie is, as we're purplerain, the only thing the movie had going for it was the freaking soundtrack, which, considering the fact it's a Prince produced soundtrack, is pretty much great. Superb. That's the best way to describe it. But Morris and Jerome tells her that that she'll fall in love with the first person she sees. Then Prince cuts off the lights and pretty much takes her. And when Morris tries to do something when the lights are on, Morris finds out that he tried to seduce Jerome, and they're all weirded out. Then there's some imaginary musical number set to joy repetition. The kid and Aura spend some time together. Then during the question of you, they're making soup on the wall. Even though Aura tries to tell pretty much words try to tell the kid that she's an angel. Like I said, this movie is fever dreamish weird. They spend time together. Then Morris and Jerome, they're counter prophets, and Morris pretty much gets big mad or angry, pretty much reveals in a rant how he came for nothing, which was just some stupid attempt trying to give Morris a backstory and an excuse for his actions. And then Morris and Jerome, they have this laughable money counting scene. And then during the meeting with TheTime, the kid interrupts them. And they have an argument in which Morris insults the kid's family issues. We're bringing up the mom's being institutionalized in a mental hospital. But unlike previous time, he doesn't feel he has no remorse for his statement. Then Aura tries to talks with Jerome to pretty much kill the rivalry between the kid and Morris. And Morris and TheTime perform Shake with Brahmin dancing in the cage. But at the end of the performance, they get interrupted by fireworks, and the kid performs Tick Tick Boom. And everything goes downhill for the kid. Then things come to a head in the climax, and let's get into the freaking climax. So, TheTime, who pretty much now act like this crime mob, they try to shake down Melody Cool, but she stings them up and sings her song Melody Cool. Then there's some fight which results in Aura being run over by the van. And Aura's death, in so many words, pretty much causes them to stop their beef. But not before Prince sings the movie's version of Purplerain, Time Time is Then All the Time, whatever the name of the song is. And the movie ends with the kid and Morris making a truce. And TC finally getting his time to shine. All in all, the end. All in all, Graffiti Bridge was freaking all over the place. It's like a freaking fever dream on top of a fever dream. The movie barely made any sense except in Prince's mind. The horror character was... It was a waste of time for George Clinton, Amanda Staples, TheTime, and Tevin Campbell. Not to mention Aura. Aura barely made any controversial story besides dying just so the kid and TheTime couldn't climb it. And the one thing good about this movie was the freaking soundtrack. Like, the movie was literally a freaking Prince fever dream. And I remember a few weeks ago, me and my brother had a discussion about this movie. And he states that watching the movie as a Purplerain sequel was horrible, but watching it without knowing it's a Purplerain sequel or leaving out the fact that it's a Purplerain sequel, it's not that. It's mid. It's mid. Not good, not bad, just mid. And I have to agree with him. Unless you like fever dream movies. Now, the next and final movie I'm going to discuss is a movie that's a lot more favored by a lot of people, both Prince and non-Prince fans, and it's called Under the Cherry Moon, which was Prince's directorial debut, and I think he also wrote the movie as well. And remember when I said earlier how Prince had a weekend level acting in Purplerain? Well, the behind the scenes of Under the Cherry Moon is kind of similar to the behind the scenes with Idol, albeit a bit very different. You see, the director, which was originally Mary Lambert, who directed music videos for Madonna, would go on to direct Pet Sematary. But Prince fired 86er as director and took over directing, and which could have gotten him in trouble with the DGA or Directors Guild Association, but because they were filming in France, he didn't get any trouble whatsoever. So the whole premise of Under the Cherry Moon, but before I get into that, Under the Cherry Moon, they were like MTV was like hyping this movie to the point where they launched a contest where the person that won pretty much get to watch the movie with Prince and the winner was a hotel maid in I forgot which town she was from, and it was very publicized. And the movie, when it first came out, it flopped. It flopped with the critics in the movie theaters. But now that Prince has passed away, it has gone through a reappraisal. Seeing that while it's not a good movie, it's still a very watchable movie. So let's get into it. The plot, so the movie begins with some narration, though this is the only narration for the movie, of Mrs. Wellington stating Christopher Tracy and how he loved women of all shapes and colors until he dies, falling for his one true love. And we're shown Christopher Tracy, who's a gigolo, alongside his brother Jerome, since I forgot the name of his character, Tricky. Christopher Tracy is playing piano, and his brother Tricky alerts him to a client, a socialite named Mrs. Wellington. And during the entire day playing piano, he winds up pretty much giving him notes and seducing her. And cut to the roll credits, where the opening credits pretty much set to Christopher Tracy Parade. And I should know there's an alternate ending where Christopher leaves from a client from a woman he souped up with, and they crash a elegant party. So the whole premise of the movie is Christopher Tracy and Tricky, they're both two gigolos living in 1950s France. And they never specify which time period, and it's very because of how anachronistic Princess fashions are. But concerning the mentions of records, Sam Cooke, and more likely it's late 50s, early 60s, and also the war. Christopher Tracy and Tricky are two gigolos that pretty much make a living targeting and ripping off rich women. And their biggest target is a young trust fund baby named Mary Sharon, played by British actress Kristen Scott Thomas. Yes, that Kristen Scott Thomas, who for years had pretty much bashed the movie. Though since she has gone on and though it didn't put a dent in her career, concerning the fact she wound up starring in movies like Four Weddings and a Funeral, The English Patient, God Only Forgives, and among other movies. But Mary Sharon is a young trust fund baby who has a filthy rich father, and she's set to get her inheritance when she turns 21. And during Mary's 21st birthday party, Tricky and Christopher crash the party, and Mrs. Wellington pretty much attends the party as well. But after getting kicked out, Mary kicks Christopher and Tricky out of her party, and as we're not getting them sniping at each other, which is what they spend the entire movie doing, which makes their little love story unbelievable and too hard to take seriously. So Christopher spends another night with Mrs. Wellington, whose boyfriend is away. And then the next day, Christopher Tracy and Tricky, they visit Mary and they chat her up a little bit more. Then Mary and Tricky, they go on a dance and start bonding. Then Christopher and Mary, they start arguing with them calling insults to each other, with Christopher calling one insults being Christopher calling Mary Sharon cabbage head, and she asks Tricky to dance with her. Then in the next scene, they go out, and it's also revealed when Christopher is leaving gifts for Mrs. Wellington that Mary's father, who instantly disapproves of her relationship with Christopher, who also happens to be dating Mrs. Wellington, gets irritated in a sense by Christopher stated about his fling with Mrs. Wellington. But later on at night, Christopher and Tricky, they go out to a fancy restaurant with Mary, and one of the people at the restaurant calls Mary's father, and during the scene, they make snipes at each other, with Christopher trying to loosen up Mary, even testing, which is also the infamous record stove scene where Christopher writes Reckastow, spelled WRECKASTOW, and pretty much plays pretty much the whole Reckastow scene. If you want to buy some Cook album, where would you go? Reckastow. Laughing at her pronunciation. And then Christopher Tracy brings a boombox, which is would never exist in the 1950s, to play Boys and Girls, and has everyone in the restaurant dancing until Mary's father kills the phone. Then Christopher receives a call from Mary, and they decide to go to Mary's house, where the kid wants Christopher Tracy. I don't know why I keep getting these characters' names confused. Accidentally seduces Mary's mother by going to the wrong room. So by the time Mary's father pops up, Mrs. Sharon's already juiced up. Then trio decide to go shopping, which Mary invites Christopher on a date, which Christopher does go on a date and think this is a tricky, and during their day they make soup. And they have a conversation regards to Mary's father. Then Christopher decides to call Mary's father and pretty much taunts him by him dating Mary, which Mary hangs up the phone and they make soup in the phone booth. Meanwhile, Tricky is pissed off that Christopher stood him up and have an argument. Then he goes out the apartment. Mary's already outside. They decided to go to the grotto where they make soup. Though it was barely graphic. And Tricky and the landlord lady, who I forgot her name. But I'm just gonna call her Sophie. They're at the bar drinking, and when Mary and Chris arrives, Tricky pretty much spills the beans and reveals that pretty much the kid Christopher only got with Mary to pretty much swindle her out her money, which causes her to dump him. And Sophie chastises Jerome for it, in which he has no remorse. Then Christopher is sitting lonely at the bar until he bumps into one of his ex-clients, a hideous middle-aged woman, which winds up living in the club. Then he goes to Mrs. Wellington, who gives him a note from Mr. Sharon, which he disregards, and pretty much decides to get back with Mary, which he does, because Mary, she was on her way to go to America, wherever she was going, to with her mother, and they make out, set to kiss. Meanwhile, Mr. Sharon sent his henchmen to go after Christopher with Jerome and Fiona, pretty much defeating them, which leads to our climax. Mary pretty much hides out the grotto and finds a love poem that Christopher wrote. And long story short, they want Sophie and Tricky, they want to pretty much defeating the henchmen, but Christopher gets shot by Mr. Sharon and dies in Mary's arms, leaving Mary, Jerome, Fiona, and pretty much everyone probably in the audience devastated. Then in a time skip, Jerome is back in America. Tricky is back in America with Sophie and runs his own, and now has his own apartment, which is financed by Mary, who lived the rest of her life alone. And pretty much, the movie ends with Jerome telling Sophie that she owes him rent, and the movie ends with a performance of Mountains. And happy ending, I guess. And now here's my thoughts. Unlike the two previous movies, Under the Cherry Moon has a very cohesive story unlike very cohesive story that's very easy to follow. But at the same time, it also has a very nonsensical love story that pretty much started off wrong. Kind of like in a fan fiction-esque love story. Christopher got with Mary just to squander out her money like he did with the previous women he flirted with, but winds up falling over her in the process. And they break up when it shit the fan, only for them to end up together, though it's short-lived by Christopher being killed off. If you want my honest opinion, Tricky and Mary had better romantic chemistry than Mary and Christopher, to the point that Tricky and Mary should have been together instead of Mary and Christopher. And I will die on the hill, and that's my hot take that I'm dying on the hill for. Jerome, and the movie also shows Prince as both comedic, as both him and Jerome have great comedic chemistry and comedic timing. And my favorite scene would be the reckless stove scene. That would be one of my favorite scenes of the movie. In recent years, the only reason why Under the Cherry Moon was remembered was because it was the movie that gave us Kiss and Another Love in Your Hole and Another Hole in Your Head. They were all part of the soundtrack for this movie, which was called Parade. And the only other big songs from that soundtrack was Girls and Boys and Mountains, which, if I remember correct, the songs I mentioned, they all had music videos too. In conclusion, and my favorite. Now let's get into what's my favorite. Which one is my favorite? My favorite would be Under the Cherry Moon, even though it's not that good, it's a decent movie. It had a great set. There was a lot more comedic timing, a slightly better acting, and a very coherent story. But in conclusion, Prince was great at many things, but starring and acting in movies, he was not. It's quite telling he was better in the music part of movies than the acting part, considering the fact he was going to contribute a movie to the first Happy Feet movie, which is probably why he allowed him to use Kiss. Because if you watch the movie, the song Kiss is sung by Nicole Kidman's character Nora Jean, during the whole mating scene, where the penguins sing love songs to attract their mate. And she sung Kiss before she got wooed by Memphis. And the song in question, Song in Heart, wound up winning a Golden Globe. But that'll be it for this discussion. And my next podcast episode will be on the problem in Ice Cube's movie trilogies, a possible retrospective on the Fosters, and the crossover referral. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Listen to this podcast episode whenever on Spotify, whichever platform podcast is available, Hope you have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Bye!